podcast. Scott Fischer here with you. Options for Senior Living is the business, and that's my company. You're here listening to Don't Let Haboob Hit You in the Face. I hope that phrase and title catches your attention. For a lot of people in the greater Phoenix area, they know what haboob is. They've seen it, they've lived it. Over my shoulder here, that's Arizona State University last summer getting swallowed by a 65-mile wide dust cloud. And behind that cloud of dust was really powerful winds. It took down trees, ripped off roofs off of buildings, and then big rain came down behind it. The crazy thing about these haboobs is that they hit us in the summertime, and there's a lot of days we go off to work and we have no idea they're coming. Or we know it's July or August and it could happen, but we're not really paying attention to the details of the day. And then we find ourselves scrambling at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when that happens. You guys, this haboob is a metaphor for what I've seen in the 25 years that I've worked with families who are experiencing the challenges of aging, typically with a loved one, and they see things happening, they feel things happening, they anticipate things are happening in their loved one's lives. And for whatever reason, denial, the stick your head in the sand, the pushback from the senior and the loved one themselves, action is not taken, and crisis hits, and the haboob is upon them. And that's a long way to set this up, but I've used this metaphor for years, and I've been struck by it on how often I talk to families, man, all these years, and they just cannot believe the things that happened in the midst of all these, of their loved ones' lives, and now how their lives are implicated and entangled into it. So the podcast here was for those people, those professionals that might know these people, or those people, typically people between the ages of 45 and 65, who are right in the middle of it with a loved one, a parent. And we hope that we give you some insights and some keys to be looking for, things to talk about amongst your loved ones and your families so that you could avoid haboob visiting your family. So today I've got a friend of mine, Logan Woodruff. Logan is he's an attorney. He's the principal for Woodruff Law Group here in the East Valley. And Logan, I'm really grateful that you've taken some time for us today to share your wisdom and experience, your insights to all this. And I saw you shaking your head. You must have heard this story or seen it once before, right?
That's right. Thanks for having me, Scott. It's great to be here.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Tell everybody about the work that you do. You've been an attorney for a number of years. Your specialty area is estate planning and estate law, but that may be foreign to some people. Talk to us about what you do.
Yeah. As you mentioned, I started my own firm, the Woodruff Law Firm, 2.5 years ago now. I've been practicing over a decade. And I really like doing estate planning. Most attorneys can't really say they like what they do. My clients are usually happy to see me, usually happy on the way out as well. So I get to talk to great people about their families, about their goals, helping them understand, all right, should something happen to me today, what plan do I have in place? What's going to happen if I didn't? What are the ramifications there? And so I help clients plan for that ultimate transition, whether it's during their lifetime in the event of incapacity, who can step up for them and take care of things while they're alive, as well as what's going to happen when they pass.
I think that estate planning is such a vital, critical part of the life experience, right? As you start to live your life and have your kids, but understand that we have parents and all that it is just heartbreaking when people ignore or I don't know, say even refuse to plan, and you see the problems that can cause, right?
Yeah, and it's more of, I hear people say it all the time, I can always get to that, right? We'll kick that can down the road, and I'm too busy this week. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of consequences for doing that until it's too late. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessarily, don't want to do it. There might be those conversations that are hard to have, but ultimately having a plan in place is really going to give you peace of mind more than anything.
Yeah, if you're listening to us and you've got a situation with parents and maybe the parents have done some planning and haven't shared it, or maybe they haven't done their planning. And I'll tell you, Logan, you would think that I'm talking about some make-believe scenario, but in real life, my wife's uncle had one surviving child, adult child. His ex-wife had passed and his oldest son had passed. Uncle Danny had been diagnosed with cancer that we didn't know, but it had been in his lungs and had metastasized and gone everywhere. It was in his lungs, it was in the liver, it was in the brain. And when we responded, we got the phone call that Danny was sick. My wife and I went running up to Cottonwood where he lived, and we went with Stacy's cousin. And when I asked Danny, where's your powers of attorney and what have you done for your planning? Danny's like, I didn't need to do that. I just have Marisa, right? And she'd been trying to call the oncologist for a couple of days and they wouldn't talk to her because he had never made her his healthcare power of attorney or given authority. So we had to go to the doctor's office, get all this done. I printed the documents off the Arizona Attorney General's website just to execute something in the moment. Got a financial power of attorney done and drawn up, and a mobile notary come over and sign it, Logan. The point of it is that even though we were able to help the situation in the moment, he was under the impression he didn't need to do anything because, well, Maurice is my person, and we couldn't get his banking done for him. She couldn't speak to the physicians for him. And then she ended up in probate anyways for dang near a year to get all that stuff settled, even though there was nobody contesting it. I say all this to go, how many people are in that boat that just don't think they need it? They don't need it.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a client who, it was the family members who came to me to say, hey, I think it was their daughter walking across the crosswalk and literally got hit by a dump truck and passed away. And then they were in the midst of, all right, what do we do now? What, like you said, what type of planning did she have? Where are the assets and all of that? So you say, oh, it'll never happen to me and I'll die on my deathbed at 95 and surrounded by my family. But is I hope what everybody's going to have happen, but it's not actually the case for everybody.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Hey, so you're in your bachelor's program and you decide to go to law. Was it always your plan to go to law school?
No. So in a prior life, I used to do construction. I did that for a number of years here in Arizona, worked for large commercial firms. And then with a downturn in the economy around 2010, then decided to go to law school. So
Go to law school. And was this kind of work your thought, or what's the core to want to be in the world of law and attorney practice?
in law school, you get exposed, I would say, mostly to litigation. It's very heavily geared towards being in court and fighting about stuff. And I did a couple internships and figured out real quick that litigation was not for me. And so if you're not going to do litigation, there's contractual work you can do or estate planning. And so figured out, didn't really necessarily love looking at contracts every day. Now you might say, Logan, aren't trusts pretty long? Yeah, but I like estate planning a bit better because, like I said, I get to work with great people and help them plan for their family. So I had an opportunity to do that right out of law school, and I've been doing it ever since.
I've talked to folks that have been bailing out of the litigation game and going, I've had enough of the fighting with people after doing litigation for 10 or 20 years. And you're in the midst of brothers and fighting brothers and uncles fighting uncles and families going to war over stuff. And proper estate planning, of course, helps prevent that from happening. If you love your kids, let's keep them out of court and let's make the plan that we want long before that happens. And I guess that's the point to all this.
Right. And not a lot of people realize that, all right, if I don't do any planning and I get hit by the bus, what's the consequence? The consequence is that there are now assets titled in the name of a deceased person. And there's no longer anybody who can come and sign the deed for the house to transfer it to the kids, right? So the purpose of probate or that court process is to appoint one person to be in charge of the deceased affairs, be able to go talk to the bank and sign deeds and deal with assets for the benefit of all the beneficiaries. Now, what I tell clients is, as you mentioned, I don't recommend probate because it's a drawn out headache of an expensive process. And as you mentioned, I've seen a lot of families fight about it in court. I had a litigator friend of mine who was hired to help with a probate case that happened, and he was down in Tucson for a week. And his legal fees were about $100,000 fighting in court over stuff, right? And yeah, it's a forum for people to make claims against your estate, whether it's one of the kids versus the other, or what about the guy 20 years ago who thought that you owed him money? Now he gets to have his day in court, right? And so you lose privacy, you lose money because now you're paying attorneys to do that. And like I said, it's a drawn out headache of an expensive process that you should definitely avoid.
Yeah. So today, what excites you about going to work every day? The nice people, helping people avoid the mess. you
Yeah, for sure. I do a lot of education with my clients, right? Helping them understand, hey, why do I want to avoid probate? What are the options? There's a lot of options that I have for clients, and there's a lot of things that clients can do on their own to avoid those complications as well. Now, without getting an attorney involved, you're more limited on what you can do. But yeah, there are definitely options that for instance, let me give you some of, and your audience some of those options. Number one, for instance, on bank accounts and retirement accounts, there's the ability to name a beneficiary saying, hey, if I die, I want this account to go to my spouse or to two of my three kids because that third one is a no good, whatever. So you can designate specific individuals on checking and savings, retirement, investment accounts, and that does avoid probate. It would, in the event that you pass away, your successors bring a death certificate to that institution, and then now they can control their share. So that's something very easy to do that doesn't cost anything, really. You just got to go invest the time and effort with your bank or your financial institution to make that happen. Same thing goes with real estate. In Arizona, we have the ability to do what's called a beneficiary deed that says, all right, I own my home now, but should I pass away, I want the house to go to my son or to my spouse or to my three nephews because everybody else shouldn't inherit or whatever that is. It allows for that transfer of that asset to pass or to happen without having to go to court, which is really nice. So once again, on the real estate side, it's recording the death certificate with the county, and then now those named beneficiaries of that beneficiary deed become the owner. In the meantime, the client still owns it, and if they want to sell it or do whatever they want to do with it, that's still possible, but it's only effective once somebody has passed away. So those are some easy options, along with life insurance, naming beneficiaries there to help clients avoid probate. But some clients say, all right, I've heard I need to do a will. What's a will? Will, what it does is I would say it takes the place of what state statute says is supposed to happen with your assets. So if you do nothing, Arizona says, all right, assets are going to go from you to your spouse. And then if there's no spouse there, then equally among your descendants. And then if not, it goes up a generation of parents and then to siblings and then to nieces and nephews down and out from there. So there's already a default pattern. But with a will, you get to say, all right, instead of that default pattern, I want it to go to charity or, like I said, two of my three kids or distant relatives. So you control who your beneficiaries are. And you also control who's in charge of that process. Who do you trust to do right by all your beneficiaries? Okay. But with a will still has to be submitted to the probate court because there are still assets titled in the name of a deceased person. So it's better than nothing, but you're not actually avoiding any of the headache that is probate when you rely on a will to transfer assets to your beneficiary.
Okay. So then the other alternative is, and this is what I was years ago taught, was that I could set up some kind of a trust, right, where the trust owns the assets, not the deceased person, and the people named as the successors or the beneficiaries, those assets are distributed or dealt with inside the trust. Is that a layman's way to explain it?
No, you're good. So here's the way that I like to explain to clients is think of a trust like a legal container. And as you mentioned, during your lifetime, you fund it with your assets. So instead of your name being on your bank account, for a lot of my clients, they'll retitle personal checking and savings into their trust. They'll transfer ownership of their home into the trust. They'll name the trust as beneficiary of the retirement accounts and life insurance so that when they die, now there's no assets titled in the name of a deceased person, and therefore there's no need to go through probate. As you mentioned, it's what's called the successor trustee of the trust who steps up and controls those assets for the benefit of the beneficiary. So in my situation, my wife and I, we have a trust. I think right now we've named my dad as our successor trustee. So he would step in, take care of final affairs, marshal assets for the benefit of my kids. And so kids would go to him down the road until they come of age. when they need help with buying a car, getting married, going to college, that type of thing. So he's in charge of that. He takes care of all of that in such a way. And because all those assets are in the trust, he doesn't have to go to court to step in and take control of them, right? The trust owns our home, and he, as successor trustee, could step up and keep it, sell it, distribute it, whatever needs to be done with that asset for the benefit of my kids. And now we don't have to go to court. Now we keep a lot of our affairs a lot more private, and that transition from whether it be me to my spouse or both of us to my dad is much smoother in that scenario.
And if for husband and wife, we're talking about if something happened to you simultaneously, then the successor trustee would step in. Obviously, if something happened to you first, your wife would, of course, run your affairs on your behalf until then, or the affairs of your family.
Exactly.
Yeah. Can I ask you a hard question?
Sure.
I'm giggling already. What is it about the human condition that puts off, kicks it down the road, avoids doing planning or doing the right thing sometimes? Why do we push back? What's in that about us?
Yeah, that's probably dependent on the individual. I think some clients are maybe a little bit scared to talk about their mortality, right? Of we all think we're going to live forever, and so why have those difficult discussions now when we can do it later? I think from my perspective, why don't people do more planning? I think it's a lot of education. People maybe have different misconstrued ideas of how much it costs or how complicated is it going to be, and I have to have all this extra knowledge and I have to have a bunch of money to do that type of planning, which is all not the case. For most of my clients, they don't have tons and tons of money, but they have goals of, hey, I want to protect my spouse, or I want to protect my kids from a future divorce, or I want to make it easier for them. And with the way I address it with clients, it's a lot of education, but I try and simplify the process as much as possible. Clients lean on me and my expertise to say, hey, here's what the process looks like. Here are the decisions you need to make. And most of my clients on the way out the door say, oh, Logan, that was way easier than I expected, or that was way easier than the last guy who helped us put some planning together, and you made it easy to think about and accomplish. Yeah, I would say having the right education can go a long way.
Yeah. And if you spend a lifetime buying a house or building a business or accumulating some things, then we've got to carve out a few bucks and make it a priority to get our planning done so that we don't end up in a mess. What happens if this thing goes messy? Like I mentioned, my wife's cousin, it wasn't contested. She was the only heir, but she had a year of interacting with the court over all of the stuff that Uncle Danny owned. What happens if kids and cousins and people or blended families and you got step kid? What can go wrong in that situation if nothing's done?
Yeah, I would say some of the biggest issues that I find come in those blended family, second marriage situations where you assume that everybody's gonna be lovey-dovey and all rainbows and lollipops, but when somebody passes and there's potentially money on the line, that changes people, right? Yeah, what I tell clients is, especially in those second marriage situations, do you guys have the same goals to your assets? Are there his and her assets? And do you want to do something different with your half that your spouse wants to do with their half? And just relying on beneficiary designations in those situations is not usually the best way to go. Because, so let's say you say, I want to take care of my spouse and I want to leave everything to her, and it's a second marriage situation. If they survive you by 5 or 10 years, you can guarantee that those kids are going to be coming to mom to say, hey, mom, I know you might have thought that you need to provide for those other kids, but you should just leave it all to us. So they're going to be talking to her about that, and vice versa, right? Of now, are your assets going to be going to your future or your second spouse's kids instead of your own, right? And how are you going to guarantee that's not the case? So especially in those situations, having a customized plan in place to avoid probate, to protect your half of the assets is really important.
Yeah, I'm a blended family. Stacy and I got married 11 years ago, and we both have three kids, adult kids, there's spouses, and now there's grandkids. And we've designated my daughter's husband to be our successor trustee. Max is reasonable. He's an engineer. He's the most unflappable guy in the family. But everybody knows that it'll be his role to carry something out. If Stacy and I happen to leave at the same time, something tragic happens to us. So the point of it is that right now everybody's getting along, and there's a distribution that we've all put in place. But I think you made a really important point there that, hey, I'm 6 years older than Stacy. What happens if I go earlier? Would something change? In my family, no way, man. Our kids all love each other. But you might have
No,
seen a
never. You're
family
kidding.
where things changed.
No, yeah, all of my clients are just like you, Scott.
Yeah,
Everything's
we're all good.
perfect. Everybody's gonna do right. Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you there. It's we tend to hope for the best, but when I talk to clients and sit down with them, we're planning for the worst, right? Of
Yeah.
in those scenarios, how are we going to make sure that this joint plan is going to end up the way we want it? And even for clients not in a second marriage situation, I talk to them about, all right, yeah, like in your case, let's say it was a first marriage and you pass away first and now your wife is around for another 20 years and some future gold digger comes along trying to get her money and cut out the kids. That is a legitimate issue that comes up a lot. And how do you make sure that you've got a plan in place so that, as you mentioned, all the hard work that you spent building your business, other assets, is going to go to your intended beneficiaries, not some future second spouse's beneficiaries?
Yeah. We had a long talk with Max just a couple weeks ago because we had done some various things. Two of our daughters now work for us at our primary business, Logan. And so now that they're involved in the family business where their siblings didn't want any part of it, now it's changed how we're going to. So we needed a new plan. And so our attorney was able to draw up a new plan. But Max, my point to that was Max was like, thank you for having the uncomfortable conversation. And thank you for always letting us in to the circle so that we know what you want and we appreciate it. We know it's a part of life we just have to deal with and not hide from. And my hope is that if you're listening to me, your adult kids will appreciate it if you start having those conversations on a regular basis. Hey, we need to have a business meeting on Saturday or Sunday. Can you guys all join me or come over or something, and just start talking about the realities that life is finite. Our stuff needs to go somewhere. We don't want our kids who we love dearly to be at each other's throats for something crazy down the road. I would feel terrible setting them up for a fight. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, let me ask you about another area of things while we're in this vein. And it's the issue of authority. Husbands and wives have statutory or customary authority over each other unless there's something else been executed to change that. But in the case of the blended family, we ran into this situation not too long ago. Husband and wife were married to each other 20 years or something, right? They were in their 80s now. They both have adult sets of kids. Mom's dementia is getting worse, and her adult kids want stepdad to get mom placed in some sort of assisted living or senior care thing. Dad doesn't want to be alone, and he's the authority, so he's pushing back. And her adult kids are like, you got to do something. There was a really famous situation a few years back. The radio personality, Casey Kasem, a lot of us grew up listening to American Top 40. Casey was an older man married to a younger gal. And when Casey got Alzheimer's and got real sick, she kept him from his adult kids, blah, 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 made the papers. Talk to me a little bit more about these issues of authority and how they play out and what families ought to be thinking about.
Yeah, so in that type of situation, when you have a spouse not letting kids have access to dad, that's difficult. There's not much even I can do in that situation because, as you mentioned, yeah, the spouses usually have the ability to make decisions for each other by default. Where I come in and can help clients is more on the back end, previous to those issues of saying, okay, you want to put a plan together, you want to have the right financial and healthcare powers of attorney in place so that you have the right people making those decisions for you when you can't. So for somebody like Casey Kasem, if he had a power of attorney in place saying, hey, I want my healthcare decisions made by my oldest son or daughter, that could have avoided that situation. Now, for most spouses, they're usually going to name each other, even a second marriage situation, as their agent, which is very normal. But the issues that I see more often, the one you mentioned, yes, does happen. The way I see it happen more often, the problems my clients face are, all right, what if I just now want to go control that account that my spouse has just in their name? The bank usually won't talk to you, even though you're married. You're not on the account, you're not the signer, you don't have the authority to deal with that. So having the right financial power of attorney in place at that point is really important to pay the bills and keep the lights on and make sure that you both are taken care of. Same thing goes with healthcare decisions, right? Having the person you want to make decisions for you is really important when you can't speak for yourself. But it's also, hey, once somebody no longer has capacity, it's much more difficult for successors to deal with those assets. And when you don't have a power of attorney in place, you usually have to go through court, through what's
Yeah.
called the conservatorship process, saying, hey, judge, dad has dementia, and now I need to sign a deed transferring the house or selling the house for his benefit to pay for medical bills. Judge, please put me in charge of his assets. And that conservatorship, just like a probate, is a drawn out headache of an expensive process that you should definitely avoid. So,
Yeah.
yeah, having the right powers of attorney in place can help avoid those situations. But also, if those assets are owned through a trust, it makes that ability for your successors to address those incapacity issues much simpler, and that transition to be a lot smoother.
We've also seen more banks push back against people's powers of attorney on the financial side, especially if they've not been updated in the last 3 to 5 years. So if you're sitting on some older documents, oh my God, please bring those in for revision or update.
Definitely agree with that. I've seen the same thing. Yeah, it's depending on the bank and what their red tape is. 2, 3, 5 years, they'll say, sorry, this person might have changed their mind since they originally signed it, so we can't accept it. Exactly. So I always tell clients, come on in, let's freshen up those powers of attorney, make sure it's more up to date so that if your successors do have to step in for you, those
Yeah.
bank can't say, yeah, go somewhere else. Yeah.
It's a much more smooth transaction. And one more piece that's inside of that, and this is our family structure. Again, my family we're like a sermon example every week. I've always got a million things inside my world that become talking points. And this is one. My father-in-law has been little by little through his aging has been losing capacity, and his decision making has been changing, right? He's living in assisted living now. They had powers of attorney that named each other. And so we talked to mom and said, hey, if something happens, dad's in charge of taking care of the business of your life. And he's in assisted living. And even though my wife's sister was named as the second, this is an older document. Does it make sense to restate your financial power of attorney at this point and just take dad out of the picture altogether?
Yeah.
So this is clearly done. And if we had to step in, Stacy's sister could quickly step in and the bank would not push back or delay because we have to prove dad's incapacity, all the things. So if you've got some complications to this, call Logan, right? Call before there's a crisis. The whole point of why we're talking about all these things is I saw a possible problem. And if you see a possible problem in your story, your family, your clients, this is where you call an expert like Logan to clarify this, to make sure that you don't have a ticking time bomb inside your family potentially.
Yeah, I usually tell clients it's usually the life events, those bigger life events that require changes, right? A spouse or a child passing away, it's usually a good opportunity to come in and update those. As you mentioned,
Yeah.
a dementia diagnosis or somebody ending up in the assisted living type of situation where now, yeah, they can't go to the bank for you and they can't do those things. Those are all great times to say, all right, we need to update our powers of attorney, and no, I can't act for you, honey, but our son or daughter can. Let's make it happen so
Yeah.
they can step up.
Yeah. Hey, as we come to the end of here, thank you again for carving out some time. This has been really, I think, really a helpful, thoughtful conversation, and that's what I want to have. What would you tell other professionals, whether they're attorneys in various forms of practice, or whether, I don't care what kind of work you're doing, financial advisement or real estate, what should people be thinking about or asking questions to stimulate conversation to help people expose the need to get their planning done or to help them prevent Haboob hitting them.
Yeah, the easiest question is, do you have a plan? Do you have a will or a trust in place? Usually those come with powers of attorney. And if they do, when was the last time you updated it? As you mentioned, those life events that have happened, have you addressed them recently? It's great to have a trust, but if it's from 2001 and everybody you've named has passed away, it's going to help you avoid some complications, but not others. So those
Yeah.
simple questions, making sure they've got those things up to date can be very helpful to stimulate that conversation with me.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You guys, 25 years ago, I worked in the healthcare system and I was a nurse, primarily working in areas of behavioral health. My clientele was particularly people who suffered from some form of dementia. At that time, I started a business called Options for Senior Living to help families navigate the complexities of long-term care and help them find and select the right long-term care solution for a loved one. Options for Senior Living has been operating in the Valley now since 2003 to help families in that regard. And so we're here for you. We're a no-cost service. We are committed to your priorities and helping you navigate a really challenging and tricky world. It's an ever-shifting world of senior living. Last year, we started a new project. Logan, this will be interesting for you. We started a project called the Aging Parent Tribe. It's a private Facebook group set up just for caregivers, adult children who are feeling the effects of this with their parents or their aunts and uncles or grandparents even. And so it's a place where you can come safely, share your journey, talk to people about resources, make sure you're not going crazy when you're thinking of things. It's people bringing their stuff to the table, Logan, and we have a lot of conversations when life is shifting and shifting hard for some people. The tribe is there for people. We have several hundred members in that group. We would love to have the opportunity to have you join the group and be a part of that. There's some professionals in there that offer guidance, but nobody's being bombed or targeted, Logan, with professionals targeting those people to do business, or because that are in that kind of crisis or that state are vulnerable to all kinds of things. And we wanted to create a safe space. So the Aging Parent Tribe, you can like and follow our show here. We really want to do what we've done over the years, and that's reach our community, raise the level of awareness, and help. When you do good planning, Logan, and people like their shoulders drop and they relax, it's like you did your job. You did what you're intended to do. And I always felt like that was my role with people. So if we can help you in any way at all, relieve the stress, release that tension, live the life that you have without all this overhead of chaos, and help you avoid any sort of crisis, man, that's what we're here for. Logan, on behalf of me and my team, we are grateful for your contribution today and look forward to more conversations with you and how we can help your business. Tell everybody the law firm, the website, contact information, if you would.
Yeah, Woodruff Law Firm. You can find me online by Googling that. It's WLFAZ.com, or reach out directly, 480-392-8840. Be happy to chat with you or anybody in your audience about estate planning.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And to our audience, thank you for joining me again today. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care and have a great one.